Hey, what's up? Today I wanted to make a video to talk about my experiences and my thoughts in building a home web server to mostly self-host NextCloud and WordPress. And in my case, I've been a web developer for a few years in the past, and currently I'm an online entrepreneur using the web, so I kind of know my ways about these things, and so I wanted to try self-hosting for everything related to online stuff and online data. And so if you're currently thinking about self-hosting your website and or your Nextcloud, or maybe creating your own web server or anything related, then this video could be for you, okay? So let's go right in. All right, so the first point that I wanted to talk about is my computer. And in my case, I simply purchased a cheap renewed computer on Amazon for 150 Canadian dollars. And you can see my setup here. And basically on the left, this is my main computer and this is currently where I am. But you see on the right here, this is kind of my new computer here. And this is a cheap renewed screen that I also purchased on Amazon. And the computer here, the exact model, is a Dell Optiplex 7010. And in this case, I wanted an SSD to make it go as fast as possible. And so it has an SSD drive of 500 gigabyte. So as of right now, my computer might be a little bit small and it might not have that much storage, but since I'm just starting out and I'm just dipping my toes right now, I just wanted something cheap just to try a bunch of things. And so if I end up being more serious about this, then I might upgrade the computer at some point and I might upgrade the components inside the computer. So that's kind of what it is. That being said, in my case, I purchased the computer, but if you have older computers that are laying around or whatever that you're no longer using, then you might not need to purchase, okay? You can simply use the old computers that you currently have, because a server or some sort of web server or any NAS is actually a really low-end computer, and so you don't really need something powerful to run a server from your home. You simply need something that can connect to the internet, if that makes sense. And so in my case, I decided to go with an actual computer instead of something like a NAS, because I generally think that computers are better, but they're also more versatile. So you can do more things with a computer than a NAS. And also, NAS are actually quite expensive. I mean, it depends on the model that you choose, but I generally think that computers, if you go into low-end computers, it's more common and it's less expensive. Like if you are going to use a used computer, you can get it for very, very cheap. So in my case, I bought this computer and this server because I want to try two things, okay? And the first thing that I want to try is NextCloud. And NextCloud is basically a replacement to the cloud storage that you might be using, like Google Drive or maybe OneDrive. And so NextCloud is a free and open source alternative to these things, and you can self-host everything. And then the second thing that I want to try is WordPress, to simply self-host my website. And WordPress is free and open source, and it's a tool to create websites. And I've been using web hosting services for many years, but I figured that, hey, maybe I could try hosting my own server and my own website. So as of right now, I'm simply running everything on my local network with my local host. So I'm still developing these things so that I can try some things, I can develop and I can work on these things. But as of right now, making it available on the internet makes me feel a little bit nervous and insecure, because I'm not quite sure about the security of all this thing. Because yes, you can connect a bunch of things on the internet, but that doesn't mean that it's all secure and stuff. So that's kind of where I am right now. So I've been trying a bunch of things so far, and one thing that I find missing about NextCloud is that, yes, with NextCloud, you're able to centralize all your data and you're able to create your own hub. But as of right now, I haven't found a way to create a WordPress website with NextCloud. Because yes, in NextCloud, you have a bunch of apps. Like, for example, you have Pico CMS that allows you to create a website, but I don't really care about Pico CMS, okay? Yes, I want to use NextCloud, but I don't want to use Pico CMS. I want to create my website with WordPress because it is the most popular website builder, so I care about WordPress. So because of that, I kind of had to create two apps on my web server. And since I have two apps, that means that I have two databases for both NextCloud and WordPress. So I think the ideal solution here would be to have WordPress inside NextCloud so that I can host my NextCloud and it has everything inside NextCloud. So I think that would be great. But as of right now, this is kind of two separate apps, but I would love to have everything in one app with NextCloud that could simply run. So the second thing that I wanted to talk about is distro and the web stack that I decided to choose. And so if you're going to do a web server, either with a VPS or simply self-hosted, you'd be better off with a Linux distribution than something like Windows. And when I purchased this computer here that I just showed earlier, it had Windows 10 pre-installed, so I had to remove that to actually install a Linux distribution. And so in my case, I decided to choose Linux Debian Edition because I've been using it on my main computer here. So since I already know my ways with Linux Mint Debian Edition, I figured that, hey, I would install it on this computer as well. And so I used this opportunity to install Linux Mint on my computer, and I also installed it on all my computers that I have. So right now, the main computer here is running Linux Mint Debian Edition. My server is running Linux Mint Debian Edition. And now my laptop is also running Linux Mint Debian Edition. So now I'm running entirely on Linux Mint Debian Edition. And as for the server, I installed the LAMP stack, which basically means Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, which are all free open source softwares. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is Docker, and I decided to purposefully not use Docker because since I'm quite new into these things and this web server here, I didn't want it to make things more complicated than it is right now. So I just wanted to try out a bunch of things. You see, if I'm more serious about this or if I want to upgrade my system later on, then I might look into Docker. But as of right now, I just decided to not use Docker. Now, the third thing that I wanted to talk about are the pros to having your own web server at home. And the first pro that I wanted to talk about is full control. And since I'm an online entrepreneur, my data, my cloud, and my websites are very valuable to me, okay? So in my case, I have a bunch of videos, I have a bunch of designs, I have a bunch of files that are important related to my business, but also personal. And so by using my own machine, I get to own and have absolute control over my data, my cloud, my website, and all of these things. Not another server, not another service or whatever, because another popular solution is to rent a VPS, and that can work great. But my problem with VPS is that you usually have to subscribe to a monthly subscription, and ultimately you don't really own the data, okay? The reason why I left Microsoft is because I wanted to own my data. And so using a VPS doesn't make sense because you're still using another person's server to do what you want. And another thing why I decided to not go with the VPS is because since I have many files, many videos, many designs, many images, I mean, VPS, usually the storage of VPS are quite limited, and so unless you're willing to spend a ton of money, then it's not a very good option. So the second pro that I wanted to talk about is centralization. And so instead of using many services to fill your needs where your data ends up being everywhere, I think one centralized hub or web server that includes everything that you need, all your data is like right there. I think that's really attractive because by having one centralized hub, you basically save time, you save money, you save energy juggling around different softwares and different services. You see, the thing that I loved when I was on Microsoft and the Microsoft 365 is that I had everything centralized with Microsoft. And by using NextCloud and WordPress on your own server, then you know that everything that you own, all your online data, all your online files are basically centralized in one hub. So I think this is really cool. The third pro that I wanted to talk about is cost effective. And when you own your own web server, you simply have to invest in the equipment that you want to use, the right equipment, and there's no limit to the things that you can do. Okay, yes, you might be limited with storage, but ultimately you can always upgrade your components. But you see, for example, I've been using Bluehost for a while now, but I just realized that Bluehost is like this is so limited when you actually think about it. Because you see, for this price here, which is I think it's very expensive. Not this one. I mean, this is the first year, but after the first year, it gets pretty expensive and you only have access to one website with 10 gigabyte of SSD. And so this is not a good deal. This is what I've been using, but I just realized that this is not a good deal. And that's just crazy. That being said, for web hosting, you can find newer and cheaper alternative to Bluehost, like Hybrave, that basically gives you unlimited resources for your website. So I think this is really cool. And this is a one-time purchase. So I don't know, like Hybrave is kind of new in the game, but you see, what I wanted to show here is that Hybrave, you have unlimited everything for a one-time fee, while Bluehost, they might be an older company, but it's just a bad deal in general, okay? But obviously, this is just for web hosting. You also have to think about the cloud hosting and everything. So in the end, having your own server, you simply purchase the equipment once, and then you can unsubscribe from Bluehost, you can unsubscribe from Google Drive, you can unsubscribe from Microsoft 365, or you can also stop renting a VPS, and so you're basically able to remove all these monthly subscription that can be annoying and that can be expensive on the long term. The only thing is that if you host your own server, you have to purchase, like I said, the right equipment, but you also have to pay the electricity to power the computer. And so since this computer is most likely going to run 24/7, like this is going to use some electricity and power to run all the time. And so in my case, I live in Quebec, Canada, where electricity is very, very cheap. So I don't worry too much about the cost of the electricity, but depending where you live, that might have an impact. And that being said, yes, you're able to host everything with your own server, but you have to keep in mind that you still have to pay for your domains. Now, the fourth pro that I wanted to talk about is IT skills. And so if you're looking to build skills into computers, website, networking, sysadmin, cloud, Linux, or anything related, then it might be a good use of your time to learn about these things, because that's exactly what you're going to do. By creating a home server, you're going to use Linux, you're going to manage some sort of web server. And so in my case, I find these things interesting because I learned computer science. I also did web development in the past, so I'm quite comfortable with these things. Now, the fifth pro that I wanted to talk about is trust and free and open source software. And so in my case, I'm using the LAMP stack for my web server. And so this stack here is fully open source. And so that means that I can trust the software I can trust the computer that I'm using because this is literally my own computer, and there's no software backdoor, there's no data collection, there's no data reselling, there's no ads or anything. And NextCloud and WordPress are both free and open source as well, so that's kind of what it is. Now that we talked about the pros, I also wanted to talk about the cons because no solution is perfect. So my fourth point here is the cons. And the first con that I wanted to talk about is the upfront investment and upgrading. And so, like I mentioned before, if you're recycling an old computer, then you might not need to invest some money into equipment. So, if you can go that way, that would be the best solution. But having your own home server requires some sort of investment. And if it's not today, then it could also happen in the future because at some point you might need to upgrade the computer, you might need to upgrade some parts or some components, you might need to change some drives, and so you have to keep that in mind. The second con that I wanted to talk about is technical skills and time consuming. And so depending on your goals, depending on the time that you have, the resources, and even your current skills, it could be hard and time consuming to do everything and manage everything yourself because that's what is going to happen. Like if you have your own web server, you're going to need to manage everything. And to set up all these things, if you don't already know all these things, then you'll most likely need to experiment a little bit, try a bunch of things, tinker a bit to make everything work. And so if you don't have the skills yourself, then you might need a friend or maybe you know somebody that could help you with these things because configuring all these things can be time consuming and you need the right skills. Now, the third con that I wanted to talk about is full responsibility. And so, yes, just like I said before, one of the pro is that you have full control of these things, but the con to that is that you have full responsibility, okay? Yes, you have full control, but you also have full responsibility. And so that means that you have to make sure that everything is secure. You have to protect yourself against attacker like denial of services. You might experience hardware failures. Maybe like some hard drives are going to fail and stop working. So these cases, you might need to do some backup. You might do some maintenances once in a while. You might need to do some configuration and software updates, either for the OS, NextCloud, WordPress. You need to manage all the updates. And with all these things, you also need to make sure that you have a reasonable uptime. You need to make sure that the server is running all the time. And so if you fail to take full responsibility for these things and these problems, then you might break something and you might temporarily lose access to the server, or maybe in some cases, you might lose all the data, which is pretty dangerous since, like I said before, like this is a one centralized hub with everything on it. And so if you mess up something, then this is not good. You lose everything. And so in my case, I don't fully know how to manage all these things, but since I'm comfortable with computer, that's something that I can do. And I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to figure out and learn these things as I go. Now, the fourth con that I wanted to talk about is the physical restraints. And so since you're going to host your own server in your own house or maybe your own apartment, you need to take into consideration the physical restraints that having your own server brings. And so, for example, the first thing that you might have to be careful is the people that have access to the server, the computer, and so the physical access. And so you have to keep that in mind because maybe someone would try to steal the computer, to try to steal your data, or maybe some people could break the computer. And so maybe you have a kid or some children that could break the computer in any way. And so since all your data is on the computer, you want to protect this computer. So you might need to restrict physical access to your computer to make sure that the computer is safe, and also you might think about encrypting your drives. Another thing that you might have to think about related to physical restraint is the cases of disasters like fire or flood that could potentially ruin and destroy the server. Ideally, if these things happen, you want to have like some sort of backup off-site so that if these things happen, then you can still have your data. And finally, the last thing related to physical restraint is that you might need to move or you might need to relocate for some reason. Maybe you want to change house, maybe you want to change apartment. And so if you're going to move or relocate, that means that the server will not be running when you're moving. And so during this time, during this downtime, that means that you might not have access to your data and the website during this time. And so in conclusion, I started to build my own web server for mostly NextCloud and WordPress. And currently I'm simply running it on my local network because I still need to decide if I want to actually take it seriously or not. Because running your own web server from home have different pros and cons, and so depending on your needs and depending what you're trying to do, you need to decide if it's the right decision for you. And so in my case, I'm not sure if I want to do it yet, so I'll have to think about it. So if you have any suggestion or comments, please leave them below. But for now, that's pretty much it for this video, and I hope that this video was helpful to you. And if this video was valuable to you, you could consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. And if you have any thoughts and comments, you can leave them below because I will reply to everything, and your thoughts and comments could also be valuable to other people. So for now, that's it for this video, okay? Peace.